I'm excited to be here with you guys today. So, the title of my speech is It's the Candidate's Franchise Sales Process, It's Not Yours. Preface the speech with this may get a little bit controversial or may go against the things you've been taught. This reflects my experience in selling franchises. There are other ways to sell and award franchises other than the one I'm proposing today. They just aren't as effective. So, I told you guys it's gonna get controversial. All right, here we go. So, my background. I've been in the franchise industry for years, scaling franchise systems. Started with a carpet cleaning brand. We sold 200 locations in 3 years with that brand. That business was purchased by a platform organization that at the time had 2 brands. We acquired a brand in the drywall repair space. That brand had needed some work, so we turned that business around, effectively built a franchise system, and from October of 2020 to October of 2022, I personally added 223 locations to that business. Every single one of those locations opened. They opened with full-time labor hired prior to going to training, and they opened with jobs and estimates on the calendar. So helped grow a home service platform company from 2 brands to 13 brands in 3 years. That company came to me and they're like, Aaron, love what you did. We're gonna buy this business at the end of the year, and it's not a franchise yet. It's in the storage space, no real economics, but we think you could do really well with it. We want you to turn it into a franchise. We'll double your salary and we'll give you a really fancy title. I was like, wait a minute, I can do this on my own. I could raise capital, I could find a business that I believe in, I could franchise that business, and I could make it become the biggest brand in the world in whichever industry I decide. So I looked at about 24 businesses and jumped from being a franchise salesperson to a franchisor, found a business called Rolling Suds, which is a 33-year-old power washing company, partnered with the founders, raised capital, acquired the franchise rights in January of last year, and we started franchising at the end of February of last year. We have sold 109 locations to 36 franchisees in 24 states, and we've done that in 11 months. The ones who have opened with full-time labor hired prior to going to training and jobs and estimates on the calendar. So, in 7 years, I've sold more than 530 units within 3 different brands, both established, emerging, and micro-emerging. Have I earned your attention? Have I earned your attention? Okay, all right, cool. So, you might be asking yourself, Aaron, how'd you do that? How did you do that? Great, that's what we're here to talk about today. So here's our agenda. We're gonna talk about the old way of selling franchises. We're gonna talk, and it's my franchise sales process. You get in or you get out, and you're a bad franchisee if you don't get into my franchise sales process. I'll tell you about my experience there. We're gonna talk about the new way of selling franchises. We're gonna talk about responsible franchise development, building trust with your candidates, and how to do that. We're going to talk about customized selling, and for just for the purposes here, I'm going to use the word selling franchises rather than awarding, just because it's going to be easier. And then tactics to start using today to sell more franchises, being a responsible franchise developer, and then we'll conclude. So, the old way of selling franchises, you have to do this step before you go to this step, and if you don't submit this, you can't talk to franchisees. And if you don't do that, you're a bad franchisee and you'll be a bad franchisee. So here's my experience with that. I was taught with the first brand that I worked on. You ask them how much money they have and where they're located, and then you get them into a webinar. And you sell them on a webinar, and if they're good and they sit through a webinar, and then they can make it to the next step. And guess what happened? Not everyone showed up for the webinar, because who wants to sit through a webinar that's an hour long on the size of the carpet cleaning industry? Anyone? No one wants to. But I bet some of you guys would be good franchisees if you found the right brand. So, I was also told that if someone had the right amount of capital and they were willing to sit through it, they'd be a good franchisee. My experience was that that wasn't the case. We were fitting a very specific mold of a very specific type of person who actually wasn't a great franchisee just because they were compliant in the sales process. And so the other thing that this does is it sets the stage for the candidate that you're the seller and they're the buyer. You're the franchisor. You tell them how to operate, and then if they can't do it, they're a bad franchisee. So it sets this like imbalanced relationship, which is awful. So the wrong franchisees signed up. It is my view that this is lazy franchise sales. So I don't know. There we go. So how much money do you have? Is your territory available? Like, we have to be able to be dynamic in the franchise sales process. There is stuff that we're going to do every single time. And when we get to my process, you'll see that it is structured. But the experience for the franchisee is it's their franchise sales process. You get a franchise. All right, so the new way of selling franchises. Prioritize exactly what the franchisee needs or this prospective buyer needs at the exact stage that they're at in the process. So with the second brand I worked on, what I learned is we were attracting higher caliber quality people. They weren't going to be the one operating the truck. They were going to be managing a team. Those types of people think differently. And so I had to adapt my strategy so that I could appeal to those types of people. So I spent more time listening and less time selling. I asked them who they were as a person, what they liked, what did they like to do for fun, what other brands are they looking at, and why? And what are they looking for in a business? What's important to them? And I didn't stop asking questions till at least 20 to 25 minutes into the first intro call. Then, before I talk about anything about the brand, I tell them who I am as a person. So I'm not just some person telling them the size of the drywall repair industry and how much it's growing year over year. They know who I am. They know my kids' names. They know what I like. Then we start talking about the brand. And then every single step in the process, they know that it is customized for them. Even though we're doing the same things, I ask them, what are the things that are important to you in a franchise brand? Then they tell me. Guess what we talk about on the first call? Those things. Then, at the end of that call, we say, hey, you mentioned that maps are important to you and understanding the territory a little bit better. Why don't we cover that on the next call? Because you said that was important to you. It's always back to them. And when I started doing this, I had more retention in the process and I signed up better candidates. So if you follow me on any social media channels, you hear me bang the responsible franchising drum a lot. So I believe that responsible franchising starts in the franchise development process. Franchisees buy into a franchise system based upon the experiences and the expectations that are set in the franchise sales process, right? So last year I gave a keynote at the IFA Emerging Franchisor Conference, and I proposed 4 core tenets of what I believe the 4 core tenets of responsible franchising are. And these are them. Capital adequacy, making sure the franchisor and the franchisee have enough money to support the system, to support the system or build the business. Choosing the right franchisees and turning away the wrong ones. So I've turned away 47 people who had the capital, wanted to write me a $150,000 to $250,000 check, and they weren't right for our system. So between $5 to $7 million in franchise fees I've turned away because I'm committed to choosing the right franchisees. Setting clear expectations, so telling them exactly how hard it's going to be and the potential upside they can experience, and then sustainable growth, not selling more franchises than you could feasibly support. And then Matt Haller actually asked for the transcript of my speech, and I don't know if you guys saw, but he recently posted an article basically quoting me and saying these are the 4 core tenets of responsible franchising, which is pretty cool. So, how do we do this with our candidates? We build trust. Before you start selling, you understand exactly what makes them tick. You listen to them, and then you tell them who you are as a person so that you can establish credibility. And you spend time learning exactly what the candidate needs and when they need it in the process, and then you deliver it in the format that they need it. This is harder because you have to train your franchise salespeople to be nimble. You have to train them to be able to go from talking about marketing to training within the same sentence. It's not, we're going to get to that on slide 17. how I do it at Rolling Suds. So I customize the process, and I put in quotations customize because we do the same steps, but each step feels that the candidate knows it's for them and it's what they need. I outline the process up front, but relate it to what they want. You mentioned the example there, or you mentioned marketing's important to you. I want to make sure we cover that a little bit more on the next call and go deeper on that. All right, Aaron's franchise sales process. I get questions about this all the time, so I'm going to give it to you exactly how I do it today, which should help you sell more franchises and find better buyers. So 1 is the introductory call. Potential step 2 is the spouse or partner call. Step 2 that happens no matter what is the FDD economics map review call with the franchise salesperson. And just so everyone knows, just to be clear, I currently do all the franchise development myself. I handle every single call, start to finish. I have a team of 16 people that support franchisees, but this is my process that I've learned over the years, and I execute it on a day-to-day basis. Step 3 is validation with franchisees. Step 4 is follow-up after the validation call. Step 5 is the ask for the order call. Step 6 is the final approval call or founder's call, and then I send the contract and they sign it. This is the most important call in the process. I have never outsourced this call to a dialer. I think you get one chance to make a first impression, and it's really hard to do that with someone who can't answer the potential franchisee's questions. So this is at least 25 minutes of rapport building before any kind of selling. You repeat the topics back to the candidate that they want covered. Hey, I know I've enjoyed getting to know you a little bit. You mentioned marketing and training and recruiting is important to you. Why don't we cover those things first? Or I can just answer questions. Whatever's best for you. I don't have an agenda. I don't have a slide deck. I'm here for you. I want to make the best use of your time. Repeat back the topics they want covered and utilize story-based selling. So if you talk about how you help with marketing, talk about a franchisee that launched and had the experience that was positive based upon your process. Optional step 2, the spouse or partner call. If you don't do this call, you will potentially have spousicide later on. Who's experienced spousicide? Raise your hand. Cool. It's because you didn't do this call and you didn't enjoy them, bring them through the process the entire time. So on that intro call, you have to identify who is the decision maker. Is there a spouse or partner? What is their involvement and what is the day-to-day going to look like? Then instead of saying, we require that that your partner is on every call, you say, hey, I think it might be good to bring them in on the next calls. That way you don't have to go and try to communicate what I'm saying. And let's kind of get them in through the whole process so that they can see the opportunity. And then it saves your time because we don't have to start over later. Again, back to them. Step 2, I never, ever send the franchise disclosure document without reviewing it with them first. The reason is because I learned the hard way. You send an FDD, they haven't reviewed it, they've never seen an FDD, then it's Friday night at 6 o'clock, they open the FDD, it says in so many words, we own your firstborn if you don't behave properly. They're having a couple drinks and then they never call you again. How many people has this happened to? Yeah, cool. So I go to the FDD, I review it with them, I take them to the sections that they're going to have questions about, and then I overcome them before they actually read it themselves. So it saves a lot of time. And then I build value around the sections they're going to have problems with. So I'm going to continue a little bit on this section because it's so important and it gets in front of a lot of time that you could potentially waste. These are the sections I cover. Initial cash outlay, how much money they're going to have to spend to us versus their working capital. Build value around the fees, so it's not just a list of fees. Item 7, paint a picture of what the other costs are to expect and be able to explain the ranges. Item 10, review financing options. Item 12, review the map. Item 19, clear and transparent financials. The more clear and transparent you can be in item 19, the faster this process will go. And then I show them the franchise agreement and I tell them I don't make any changes no matter what. Step 3, validation. Now they've learned the information they need from me and now they're going to talk to franchisees. We do FDD review calls as group calls because it's just too much for it. We've 25 people showing up on every FDD call right now. And then we do group calls for franchisees as well, that the franchisees lead these calls. So you want to get buy-in from the franchisees on their involvement on this. And then franchisees offer recordings of past calls. Follow-up call after the FDD validation calls is the point to fill in any blanks and walk through any concerns that have come up through validation or FDD, and then learn where they're at in their decision-making process. You may have more than one follow-up here. Remember, you're going at their pace. Step 5, to ask for the order call. They have all the information they need at this point. You get them to commit to a timeline of making a decision on the previous call. Then you ask low-pressure questions about how have things been going since we spoke last. This may bring you back to validation, it may bring you back to another map review, and that's totally okay. Fill out the pre-approval, and then now they go into the final stage of our approval process. This is very important. Once they've made the decision, they go into the step of our approval process. It shifts the process. Now no longer, and so for many of you, this would be the discovery day stage. I told you I'd be controversial. I've never done a discovery day. I've done over 530 units, and I've never done a discovery day. See, I put the gasp up there. It's kind of cool. I find them, personally, to find them inauthentic and performative and put me in a position of being the seller and them as the buyer, which is a hard one to recover from. I also find them to be slightly manipulative because it's typically like, we're going to send you the agreement. If you don't sign it in 5 days, we're giving your territory away, which is, again, a terrible experience. All right, so we focus on an approval process or a Zoom call that gives them the opportunity to sell us on why they should be a good fit. All right, issue contract and set the signing day. Get commitment on timeline, put a signing day on the calendar for them, suggest the lawyer, but for me, I reset expectations that there's not a word in the document that we change. And then call the franchisee to congratulate them, and now they're a franchisee, and they go into the onboarding process. So we're going to talk about 11 tactics you can use today to sell more franchises. Whenever I do these speeches, I try to give you actionable items that you can take home with you today that will make you better at the thing you're here to get better at. 1, listen to understand and deliver the information in the order the candidate needs it. 2, know how to clearly and quickly explain each layer of your support model in 3 minutes or less. If it takes you longer than 3 minutes to explain how you help a candidate with marketing, your process is too long. If it takes you 3 minutes, or if it takes you longer than 3 minutes to talk about how you help train franchisees, your process is too long. Then explain it to them at a 3rd grade reading level. Instead of, hey, we're going to do IP targeting and we're going to do, this and that with marketing. Within a certain amount of time, whatever you can commit to, your business will be on the top of the page on Google. Very easy to understand. 3, practice story-based selling to reinforce the points you're making. The more you talk to your franchisees, the more stories you'll have, the more engaged those franchisees will be in validation because they'll be telling you the exciting stories about their business, and you'll be able to share that with the candidates that you're talking to. Bring the spouse or partner early on in the process by making it a good idea for them rather than something you need for your process. 5, temperature check at the beginning and end of every call. Ask them where they're at, what they like, what they dislike, where they're at in their search. 6, have the same exact marketing collateral in different formats. If you only have a PDF, franchise brochure, people consume information differently. You need podcasts, you need videos, you need every single emails, text messages, links that deliver the same information in a different format because, again, people consume information differently at different times and in different ways. 7, ditch the webinar. It's probably boring. 8, review the FDD before sending it to the candidate. 9, no calls longer than an hour, ever. No matter how good the call is going, we've got 27 minutes left in our call. I want to make sure that we make the best use of your time. What questions do you still have for me? 10, potentially ditch discovery days. I know most people aren't going to do that, but that's my suggestion. 11, always book next call before getting off a call. If you chase candidates around and try to get things scheduled later, it's just going to be wasting time. So, hey, what time works for you the next call? The other thing I do here, which took me a long time and a lot of mistakes to figure out, is I say, I have next Thursday at 2 o'clock available. Does that work for you? Rather than when works for you to have a next call, because no one knows their calendar. But if you give them one time, then they can say yes or no, and then you can give them another time. Most importantly, guys, this is why I'm here. This is why I took 2 days off. Responsible franchising starts in the franchise development process. I am part of the next generation of franchisors, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the 4 core tenets of responsible franchising as it relates to franchise sales. Set the right expectations. If it's going to take full-time involvement for the franchisee to run the business and actually be successful, don't sell it as a part-time, semi-absentee model just because you want to get a deal done. It's a terrible, terrible idea. Capital adequacy. I have done no SBA loans. Again, I told you guys I'd be controversial. I make sure that the franchisee can afford the business that they're buying without leveraging everything they've got and chasing a $7,000 SBA loan on a monthly basis. So I make sure each franchisee has the money and they have more money than they need. We're $250,000 to $350,000 liquid that they need to have in order to qualify for a franchise. Sustainable growth. I do not sell more franchises than I can feasibly open. I wouldn't recommend any emerging franchisor sell 100 locations year one like I have. The only reason that I've been able to do it is because of my experience in franchising and because I have a really big payroll and an incredible staff of responsible franchisors that support franchisees. But know exactly how much it's going to cost in infrastructure to get one unit open and profitable. And then back into those numbers and only sell the amount of units you can feasibly support. And then choose the right franchisees. Your most valuable thing that you're selling is territory. So if you sell it to a bunch of people who aren't going to be right for your brand, you've got a bunch of lawsuits and no successful royalty stream. You're going to spend way more money getting the franchisee out of the system than you're going to bring in selling the unit. And so my hope is, by coming here, that it is helpful, A, for you guys to bring in more qualified franchisees, but also so that as we enter the next generation of franchise development professionals, we can be transparent, we can be kind, we can set the right expectations, we can make sure the right capital is there. And then what will happen is we'll have more successful franchisees, which means there are more successful franchisors, and there's more business owners, which makes society more interesting. So I hope that you guys go into this next generation of franchisors with me, being a responsible franchise development professional. And you guys can follow along. I put a lot of content out on franchising. So thank you so much.